Hi, and welcome to another edition of Newsmakers Journal of the Vaccine Year. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, July 23rd, and we have a special Mansplaining City Hall edition joined by Josh Molina of Newshawk and Nick Welsh of Independent. Thanks, guys, for being here. A quick word on COVID. Alarming. That was the word that no less a figure, Dr. Henning Ansorg, epidemiologist to the stars, used this week to describe the 90% increase in cases in Santa Barbara County in the last 2 weeks. He said we are in a new wave that is equivalent to the summer of 2020, and it is all due to the Delta variant. There is a way to not get sick, which is to get the vaccine. The Delta variant 200 times stronger, carrying more virus than the original COVID-19. If you haven't been vaccinated, please do so. You're 15 times more likely to be sick, to get sick. And you can find all about it at publichealth.org. Please get vaccinated, and if you wear a mask, and I think we're going to be back to mandatory mask wearing pretty soon anyway. All right, lots to talk about at City Hall this week. And the sequence of events actually began the previous week with the announcement of City Administrator Paul Casey that he's retiring. We talked a little bit about it last week, but Josh, you scored a podcast interview with Casey. What did he make any news in it? Did you learn anything new?
Well, I think what was interesting was that Paul basically admitted that he doesn't have time for any of this anymore. He's done. When I asked him pointedly about the job performance of the mayor, the inefficiencies of the city council, he very clearly said, I'm a professional, Josh. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to start talking about that. It's very clear that a variety of factors have led up to this. The dysfunction of the Santa Barbara City Council, obviously the litigations, the lawsuit, so much having to do with problems going on with personnel. We know about the Rob Dayton situation now. And he was done, and he can afford to be done because he's 55 and he's maxed out or very close to maxing out on his pension. And as many of them do, they can go make money consulting. So I think the news of the podcast is to hear it straight from his mouth that he's done, he's gone. He doesn't really try to hide it. He doesn't go into detail about everything, but he's basically saying, I've done my thing. And if the council, if the community wants somebody else to come in here, bring him in and we'll see how that person can do.
Well, and the other thing, he's been working his ass off 24/7 with the pandemic and the economic shutdown and the anti-racism protests for the last 18 months. I mean, Nick, I know you talked to Casey too. And I mean, it just seems to me there's nothing really hidden going on here. What you see is what you get. He's just like,
yeah, I mean, I think that the magic number Josh mentioned, 55, is probably the key pivot thing. That a number of years ago, the retirement laws were changed so that at age 55, you're able to retire with maximum benefits. It's interesting, Dave Davis, his predecessor, sort of his mentor at City Hall, retired at age 55. A lot of people, I think, are going to retire at age 55. Why? Because you can. And there's no doubt that this has been an absolutely brutal period, no matter how cohesive the city council is, no matter how good a job you're doing in terms of personnel, it's brutal. But, you know, obviously in this case, you have a city council, many of whom are very inexperienced and they're still figuring stuff out. They don't get along particularly well. You have district elections. So they are sort of scattered electrons without a very clear, nucleus, and it just makes it that much harder. Paul, obviously, you've got the Samaria lawsuit, which is
sexual
the sexual harassment lawsuit, which isn't good. You've got city losing a bunch of major lawsuits and litigation that they're gonna have to, figure out what to do. You've got a police chief. The first wave of recruits for the new police chief position were underwhelming. They're gonna have to extend the recruitment period. Barney Malekian, the interim chief, is gonna have to stay in longer than he had planned. You've got
That's
really from top to bottom, City Hall is sort of, sort of and spin and recycle, and we're studying the snakeskin.
all right. So if Casey's pending resignation is sort of the first act of the latest episode in our civic soap opera, then this Rob Dayton situation, which you referenced, Josh, Rob Dayton, the longtime transportation czar for the city. What's the basic facts about that? What do we know?
Well, it's like a bad game of telephone, unplaying, right before our eyes at City Hall. This situation never should have happened. It got out of hand. Rob Dayton is a member of a group called Believer's Edge, which is a Christian men's group. In the world of Christianity, evangelical Christian faith, it's not uncommon. You have a women's group, you have a men's group. They talk about issues that husbands, that men, that fathers face. And so Rob was involved in this. Where it got a little weird was that part of this group's mission statement is to bring that influence into the world of media and government and into the secular world. And so
stated in their mission statement.
That's stated in their mission statement. Okay. So, both Nick and I chose to protect our sources and our stories. So I'm going to continue to do that here.
But protect your sources because it's a personnel matter.
Yeah.
And nobody's talking about it. And
Barrett Reed, chose to name a council member. But the bottom line is that council member found out about Rob Dayton's involvement with this group. The council member also believed that Barrett Reed is also a member of that group. Council member in my story
Barrett Reed, who is running against Kristen Seddon in District 4. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, he named her. I think Nick says multiple council members went to Ariel Kalan, and from there it got out to a variety of sources. And the worst one, it got back to Rob Dayton. And so what was for a long time, just like, did you know Rob is involved in this behind the scenes, turned into a legitimate thing now, where he went and filed a lawsuit saying, hey, all these people
He didn't file a lawsuit. He didn't file a lawsuit.
He filed a complaint with the city where he basically said, all these people are talking about my religion. I've been passed over for these jobs. So now he's suggesting that maybe the knowledge of his religion has something to do with him not getting these jobs. He wanted to be a community development director. He wanted to be the economic development manager. Didn't get those jobs. He asked Paul Casey to create a special position of him to oversee the redevelopment of State Street. Paul Casey said no. And before you know it, everybody who was gossiping to each other, it all got back to Rob. And Rob went to HR and said, we can't do this. Now, there was some term thrown around. Somebody referred to Rob's involvement as a cult. And that word really set off Rob Dayton, that he was very offended, according to my sources. And that's what led to last straw. Let me go file this HR complaint.
So Nick, your story was slightly different than Josh. Can you clarify? So did this begin when a council member said, hey, I think there's a violation or could be a violation of church and state or some such there? Or did it begin when Dayton went to HR and said, my rights are being violated because of my religious beliefs?
I don't know. I don't pretend to know exactly. I do know that, one council member in particular was upset. Others reportedly have weighed in on it in some fashion or another, all of which is sort of crossing a line. I mean, Rob Dayton has never, first of all, people need to understand who Rob Dayton is. He's a very dynamic, creative, charismatic, character with.
Bicycle cultist.
He's a big bicycle advocate. He's a big alternative transportation advocate. He has an enthusiastic, can-do spirit. He is, people who like him a lot. People who don't like him a lot. He is not a quiet bureaucrat. He's not a gray flannel personality. He's a believer in his mission. And he's a believer in Santa Barbara. He's a major player in why State Street looks the way it does right now in response to the pandemic. Not the only one, but a significant player. Rob Dayton can be a little too for people inside the Beltway.
And as a policy matter, shortly before all this stuff began, he was stomping all over the historic landmark.
Yes, the Historic Landmarks Commission thought he was going over their head on 2 or 3 different occasions. Kristen Seddon was very upset with how he was dealing with the Historic Landmarks Commission. They had words about it. Rob disagreed and said, no, I'm not going over anybody's heads. I'm working with them. I'm respecting them. They did not feel that way. There was a task force set up earlier with 3 council members, Kristen Seddon, Megan Harmon, and Oscar Gutierrez, to discuss State Street. It was Kristen Seddon's criticism that it was a creation of Rob Dayton for Rob Dayton by Rob Dayton, and they were afterthoughts. She was very upset with the limited role. And so when the new State Street Committee that was just appointed this week was sort of in the gestation hopper, Kristen pushed very hard for a much bigger number of people to be on the commission than Rob initially wanted, which was, I think, 6 or 8, and it wound up with 15.
Because she felt that Rob would just dominate the 6 or 8 people.
That was her concern, yeah.
So then we pivot to the next development this week, which was the old State Street Subcommittee now has evolving into a future planning State Street Committee, a much more formal process. And 3 council members were going to be on it, and they most of them wanted to be on it. But it was a big surprise when the deal went down, Josh, and we'll pick up the story there. What happened with that?
So they appointed the members of the State Street Advisory Committee. They had to nominate, the council members got 3 seats, and they had to nominate themselves, and 2 got left out. So Megan Harmon got it, Mike Jordan got it, and Alejandro Gutierrez got a spot. The 2 who were left out were Oscar Gutierrez and Kristen Seddon.
Both of whom had worked on the other one, and both wanted to be on the continuing committee, correct?
Yeah, let's not beat around the bush. This was a massive snub to Kristen Seddon.
Everybody was mad at her about the other thing.
Yeah, everyone's mad at her, whether she's the one or not, or who wants to say it or whatever. But there's a perception, okay? And then Barrett Reed went on your show and named her. So, if he's saying that, then other people thought that. And so she didn't get enough votes, and what was really interesting was Alejandro Gutierrez voted for Mike Jordan. Mike Jordan voted for Alejandro Gutierrez. These are individuals who in the past have not always got along, to put it nicely, up there. So that's odd right away. Like anyone watching, paying attention, like what kind of a deal was struck here for you to support each other. So Kristen's left out. She did a lot of the work. Oscar, was involved. He was on that committee as well. But, Kristen was a real player there.
And she was shocked. She was shocked.
She didn't get the support. So it was, I don't really care what anyone says. It was intentional and deliberate.
Yeah. And of
course, so you're saying it's not political, it's personal. I mean, it was clearly, Kristen has not made a lot of friends in the last couple of months at the council, and there were a lot of people who were upset about her for a host of reasons. And this was a contest that people saw coming from a long time. And it was very clear that she did not have the votes. And so, yeah, it definitely was a snub.
And of course, who ends up looking good in the middle of this once again is our coastal commissioner, Megan Harmon. Was this a conspiracy woven by her, Josh, or what was her role in all?
I would never utter those words, Jerry.
I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking questions.
Megan Harmon voted for Kristen Seddon, and Kristen Seddon voted for Megan Harmon. So we do know that. I don't know, those two are trying to get along, at least in public. I don't know to the extent of who was involved in what, but I do know that things from covering government for 20 years, things like that just don't happen. There had to have been a plan going into the meeting of who was going to vote for who in order.
Okay, but let's just say,
All right,
there was
Nick,
clearly
you-
going into the meeting, it was a foregone conclusion that Kristen Seddon wasn't going to get it. But let's also
Kristen,
step back a little bit
Kristen
here.
know that? Did she
Huh?
know that? Did she know that?
Kristen didn't know it.
I don't pretend to know what she knows, but I would have.
That's two portends in one 30-minute show, Nick.
What? Kristen does not represent State Street. She does not have a bite of the State Street apple in her district. Megan Harmon represents downtown. She has a huge chunk of State Street in her district.
Last time I checked, Megan Harmon, yes, she absolutely should be on there. It's her
there's just
district.
no way Megan Harmon.
What about
wouldn't make
Mike?
sense.
What about
Last
George?
time I checked, Mike Jordan's district did not run through State Street. Oscars,
Mike
by the way,
Jordan-
is a little bit does.
No, but Mike Jordan represented, he was on the downtown organization board. He represented the business community on the Creeks Committee. He represented the business community on the TCC committee. He has been Mr. Downtown Business representative on lots of these committees. So again, based on his experience, it would have been hard to make a case why he shouldn't be on there. He was sort of a no-brainer.
Can I play journalist here for a second on your show, Jerry?
Absolutely.
Does it objectively make more sense for Alejandra or Kristen Seddon to be on that panel? I'm just asking the question.
Oh, it makes much more sense for Kristen or Alejandra?
Yeah.
I don't know. Kristen clearly
I'll
has.
say it. They couldn't have an all-white panel. I
think that was a critical consideration. I think what Kristen brings to the equation is somebody who has what she has, she grew up here as a teenager going to, shopping on State Street. So she has a much more of in her bones understanding.
She's got the Sheila Lodge sensibility.
Yes, coupled with a Sheila Lodge sensibility, which you need that at the table. You need somebody who is more focused on maintaining sort of the small town, but cosmopolitan in the same breath vibe, and that is Kristen.
Let me say, just on behalf of Alejandra, we've heard this conversation about why does State Street get all the attention and Milpa Street doesn't, and even though it is a quote-unquote State Street development committee, I think it's going to be more broadly economic development, and that's her district. And if she does anything, she represents her district. And so I think, I can see an argument.
Well, how about this? I don't think we should have any council members on that group. It's all going to come back to the council. These council members are going to have an outsized influence on what happens. And by the way, when it finally gets to the council, what are they going to say? We worked on this, so it's ready to go. And
So
it's
That was the whole point. That was the whole point.
And so I think, why not just wait till it gets to the council and let the community come up with their best recommendations?
All right. Before we move on, let me just a couple of questions about Barrett Reed and Kristen, because that's obviously going to be an entertaining race. For sure, it's going to be expensive, and You know, I thought that Barrett, when I interviewed him on Newsmakers, was, you know, he's very thoughtful. He's very well informed. And he, you know, he was prepared with a bill of particulars against Kristen, and, you know, labeling her as not, shut up, labeling her as not indecisive, but I don't know.
Inconsistent.
Inconsistent. Thank you very much. Which, you know, she wears her heart on her sleeve. She does kind of agonize in public about a lot of decisions. I don't know that that's a voting issue for a lot of people. Do you think that that's an argument that's going to have any legs? Josh?
I don't, so that's a hard thing because the insider game, it matters. That's what people talk about. But at the end of the day, the voters, it's too nuanced. It's most people aren't going to be like, I remember when she supported the PLA and then on the last minute on the consent calendar decided she wouldn't. I don't think that's going to be an issue. Of course, a good candidate, though, will take all that stuff, those inconsistencies, put it into campaign literature, put it on the air, put it on TV, repeat it over and over and over. That's the only way that that makes a difference. And then that campaign, you know, that candidate makes it an issue and a theme. But if you're just expecting people who watch council members on Tuesdays, council meetings to know, it's not an issue. These are personality games. These are all personality games. Kristen Seddon is very likable in her district. Barrett Reed's going to have to figure out a way to be more likable and more well-known. And he's going to spend a lot of money to do it.
What about the fact that
more than just likability? I mean, I think they're both likable. And you know, what's interesting, I mean, you have two candidates who really are running, you know, they've been around for a while. They both grew up in Santa Barbara. You know, they represent different aspects of the value spectrum. And Kristen is sort of an interesting, sort of the old school, feel lodge, slow growth, you know, keep Santa Barbara, you know, in scale development. You know, it's much more her
he
thing,
grew
but
up here too. He went to Santa Barbara High. I mean,
he did too.
he's
And you know, if
born-
you listen to him, he talks a lot about, you know, business reforming, you know, the red tape monster of City Hall. He talks about, you know, the criminal homeless elements and how we have to separate the criminal homeless versus the ones who can be helped. He's you know, he's a former Republican who is now a declined state. And that's just sort of a hard hill to climb in Santa Barbara.
although district, if you can do it anywhere, District 4 is where you can do it.
District 4 is pretty good. He's a very thoughtful person. He's not just some rabid dog. He has a lot of information. They both care deeply about the community. So I think it's actually going to be an interesting, painful race.
All right, let me ask you this. Is it a voting issue, which is to say an issue that voters care about, that he has not voted in the 4 most recent city elections?
It'll hurt. Whether, you know,
they can make something of that?
it's probably about 4 points, you know. It's like, okay, you're a born again believer in downtown, you're a born again, you know, interest in local politics. Where were you when it counted? You know, again, it's sort of.
I want to say that that's a double standard. If we're going to be real about this, if you had a candidate who's a person of color and you tried to tell them, you know, you haven't voted, so you shouldn't be running, you know, that doesn't matter. What matters is the person's involvement. There are barriers to why some people don't vote. And I'm not going to say that those apply to Barrett Reed. Clearly, he didn't vote because of his own choices. But I don't think we should be judging candidates based off of whether they have voted in previous elections. Some people are not aware of the system. Some people are busy. Some people work multiple jobs. Some people, they don't have these issues on their radar because they're caring for their families. I'm not necessarily saying that that's the situation.
Yeah, I mean, what's weird about him is he voted in the city election in 2003. He voted in the recall of 2005, or maybe I have those backwards. And he voted in every single even year election, presidential years, midterm years, presidential years, but he missed all of the municipal elections. which
As I recall, and correct me, Jerry, Oscar Gutierrez, was he even registered to vote, or was he even registered as a Democrat
was not
before-
registered as a Democrat. He was
before he
registered,
sought the Democratic
declined
nomination?
the state, and then he registered as a Democrat.
So I think that's a real tricky game, and it's hypocritical when you start trying to judge people based off of whether they voted, what party they were in, whether they changed their party for a local election.
I'm just asking questions, Joe.
No, I'm just saying that like if you don't like Barrett Reed, don't like him because, you know, there's a variety of factors. But the fact that he didn't vote, I doubt there's anybody out there who's going to say, well, I really like Barrett Reed, but he didn't vote a couple times, so I'm not going to vote for him. They already are not going to vote for him.
All right. And the other thing is he very clearly stated on the show that he is not a member or follower of Believer's Edge, contrary to the widespread rumor that had been going around for months and months and months. Apparently he gave a talk, Believer's Edge, once. He said that he knows people via his volunteering at the county jail involved in Believer's Edge, and he's close to, I guess he's close to Rob Dayton. Yes, Josh, is that true?
Yeah, he and Rob Dayton, they know each other well. I believe they're friends. He did your interview was really, really good. You know, he named Kristen, he talked about Believer's Edge. He made a lot of news in his interview. So I guess I've not seen him talk. I don't know what he said at this event, but I mean, I think it's a slippery slope. Some people have used the word cult. I don't think it's a cult for people to be evangelical Christians. Like, hello, I mean, everybody has a
Everybody
religion.
knew Rob Dayton.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
what you.
everybody knew Rob Dayton was very evangelical around City Hall. That was not a secret. Whether he belongs to an all men's group whose stated mission is to influence public policy, he wore his Christianity on his sleeve.
All right, and then real quick, another of Newsmakers' hobby horses came up at council. The project labor agreement that finally got approved, and Kristen, who had voted in principle to go ahead with it, voted against it, which Barrett Reed already was saying was a flip-flop, but she's saying it's not really a flip-flop, Josh, because of why? Because of this double dipping on the benefits or something, yes?
Well, and Nick might remember this history better than I do, but to Kristen's credit, she has always been sort of cautiously supportive of the PLA. She had concerns about employers having to play into a union fund and also a separate fund for retirement and pension benefits during the length of these contracts. And she couldn't get an answer on Tuesday. I mean, the most clear answer that came was it's up to the employer. There was never a definitive answer. So she had always raised that question. Is there a double payment here that employers are going to have to, that contractors are going to have to make? She couldn't get an answer. When it came time to approve it, she voted against it.
Yeah, based on the gobbledygook, the city attorney's office was saying, quoted in your story, it seemed to me that the agreement says, no, you got to pay the union benefits. And whether you pay, keep these guys employed essentially or not is up to you. Was that your understanding of it, Nick, or had you fallen asleep by that point?
Yeah, I fell asleep by that point, but my sense is that, yeah, you will have to pay, and you will probably not be able. It's doubtful you will be working for paying to the union account long enough to vest so that you can enjoy the benefits. So that was something that she had raised from the very beginning. She had been extremely leery and gun shy about the PLA deal from the start. I think in some sort of fit of let's try to all get along, she could have green-lighted it because that was the will of the council. I think that she had an opportunity as the chair of the ordinance committee to keep it bottled up.
Yeah.
At a time when she could have killed it, she didn't. And I think she will probably regret that. But Yeah, that, she wanted that question answered. It wasn't, and so she voted against it.
Yeah, which I think,
And
that-
again, it's so complicated.
except,
If
I
you
mean, the
say
city
PLA, people
contractors,
are gonna go to sleep.
the city contractors who have not used union leave have been saying this from the start. What this is about, it's about the unions worrying about the decrease in their pension funds and keeping their health benefit funds going. And this is going to force some people to do it. And they're doing PLAs all over the state for that reason. And that's what's behind it. And that's what's been behind it from the start. All right, Nick, I'm looking forward to your piece on the Hal Conklin memorial service at the Mission the other night. What was that like?
You know, I think I wound up plagiarizing something I wrote before.
Ooh, self-plagiarization.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna be in trouble. It was really, there was about 300 people who showed up at the Mission steps on Wednesday night, many of whom from Hal Conklin's church. He was a member of the Free Methodist Church. Laura Capps was probably the best known person to speak in sort of a eulogy. She was quite moving, I have to say. She really, the Capps family and Hal Conklin, who had been mayor briefly, had been a city council member for about 17 years, really left large footprints in Santa Barbara Sands, helping to start the recycling program with the Community Environmental Council, helping to get 7 acres of land set aside for, Chase Palm Park. He's done a ton. And so he died of brain cancer, 3 months ago, and this was sort of the belated farewell. There were a number, I didn't see Sheila out there, but Helene Schneider was there, former mayor, Marty Blum, former mayor, Randy Rouse, wannabe mayor, Deborah Schwartz, wannabe mayor, were there. Oscar Gutierrez showed up. A lot of people showed up to pay their respects.
Who did not show up?
Kathy said she had a cold and couldn't make it. It's not lost on anybody that, Hal ran against Kathy last time and has never been impressed by her chops. So I don't think they ever really got on good feet. It was a moment missed, I would say.
It's yet again a demonstration of Kathy's inability to reach out to people who disagree with her or who are differ with her in political.
She probably should.
Is the mayor, okay?
Was
what did you call it? A high mass of local
politics?
politics?
It was a high mass for politics. And
the mayor has to be there. And if, even as a political matter, like in Chicago, the mayor would go just to make sure the other guy was dead. It makes no sense at any level. Josh, you agree with me, don't you?
Well, I guess we're assuming she was not sick, but even if she was, I will say this, that if you're the mayor, you're running for re-election. Actually, forget that. Just as a show of respect to somebody else who served for so long.
Thank you.
She should go. And if she's sick, it was outdoors. There's nothing stopping you from hanging out at the very back and just sort of being there because it's important to you to sort of say goodbye to Hal in this public
or
setting.
Doing a drop by.
There's many ways to do that. So it's disappointing that she didn't figure out a way to do that.
All right, Josh, who you got on the podcast?
We're going to be talking housing with Rob Fredericks, the executive director of the Santa Barbara Housing Authority. So lots of good discussion on, everything you want to talk about, which is, what is the total number of residents we should have in Santa Barbara?
Hey, did you see me drilling down on the RENA numbers within that interview? I was ready for that. I'm all about housing policy, Josh.
What is that magic number? 2,000? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good to me. And Nick, I believe you have the story of the week, which has got to be getting more traffic than anything else at the Independent. I won't attempt to characterize it, but feel free to tell us what the headline was again.
I can't remember what the headline is, but it does have something about genital manipulation constitutes despicable conduct.
Judge rules manipulating genitalia of driver was despicable conduct. Yes, thank you very much. That's a must read over at independent.com. And Josh, what's the, where do people find the podcast again? On newshawk.com.
Well, everywhere, Jerry, on all streaming platforms, YouTube and SantaBarbaraTalks.com. And I'm just following what you're doing, Jerry. So imitation is the best form of flattery.
I heard that you are spending your evenings listening to Mike Tyson's podcast and getting all your tips from that. I don't know if that's true or not, but
I watch a variety of podcasts, both for my graphic purposes to see what other people are doing. But yes, your source is correct. And by the way, your source has told me a few things about you and
all
how
right,
you spend
that's
your evenings,
that's
Jerry.
it for this edition of Newsmakers. We will see you next time. Get vaccinated, stay 6 feet away, and mask up. Go Giants.